Coming up today on Uncommon Sense, join us as we interview Noelle Mering, renowned author and fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. Hello, and welcome to Uncommon Sense, the official podcast of the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton. I'm Grettelyn Darkey, your host, and joined today, as always, with my wonderful co-host, Joe Grabowski. How are you today, Joe?
Very well, thank you.
And as I said, we are very blessed and excited to be joined by Noelle Mering today. Noelle, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. If you don't mind, for our listeners who haven't heard of you before, would you give you a little bio of yourself, introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. I am a wife and a mother of 6 children, half of whom are not children any longer, living in Southern California with my husband, Adam. We both went to an evangelical college. I'm a revert. He's a convert. And I have written 4 books. 3 are in the Theology of Home series with my co-author, Carrie Gress. We co-edit the website, theologyofhome.com. And then I wrote a book on my own called Awake Not Woke, a Christian Response to the Cult of Progressive Ideology. Mm-hmm. And I'm a fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center.
Very impressive. Well, I've recently read your book, and it was very, very interesting. Really enjoyed it. I think let's talk a little bit about wokeism, if you don't mind. So what is wokeism, and is it something that Christians can subscribe to?
Yeah, no, that's the big question. So my working definition, I do find that it's hard to succinctly encapsulate all of the parts of it, but I would say it's a materialist understanding of the world that seeks to perfect it through a revolution that's fueled by 2 things: identity politics and an ever-evolving sexual revolution. So there's a lot there. In the first half of that definition, materialism sort of encapsulates, I think, the basic worldview that also tends to be utopian because it is built on materialism and the social reengineering that comes from that and the denial of human nature. And then the second half, we can talk about more in the interview, but identity politics, the collectivization of the person, redefining his moral stature based on victimhood, which also means based on the ability to be an accuser. And then the sexual revolution, which I think we're seeing how that doesn't stop. It just keeps going. You reach one sort of plateau or cross one barrier and think, oh, maybe this is the final frontier and now we're all going to live in harmony. No, it's going to keep going until the human being is utterly denied and destroyed. So that's sort of the short answer to that.
And I think that answers the second part of the question too, that no, it's not terribly compatible with Christianity. I appreciated your book because it sort of, no pun intended, woke me up to some of the places that that ideology had crept into my own life. But it's I think it's kind of a sneaky ideology, and it can. You describe like 3 steps where compassion, I forget the middle one, and then coercion, right?
I think that there's 3 major forms or main forms of manipulation, and they usually happen in 3 somewhat of this progression, but they can overlap and go back and forth. But manipulations through pity, false compassion. I think we see that kind of everywhere. We've all grown up with it, that your compassion becomes like a weapon. And then the second one is fear, fear of social retribution, civic retribution. Obviously, cancellation is part of that. But I think it's really compelling. I think that humans have a deep-seated need to feel like they belong, to feel that other people think that they're not horrible people, or think that they're not bigots or something. And especially as Christians, this is, I think, really manipulative because compassion is not an accidental part of our belief. It's at the very core of it. And so for us to be told, in order to love people, you have to subscribe to this ideology and apply your love in this particular way. I think that really kind of has silenced a lot of people and made them just want to go along with it because they might think, well, I don't want to represent Christ poorly. And this is how love is perceived now. So I need to kind of conduct myself and alter my beliefs and what I'm willing to support based on that new kind of understanding. So I think that's been hugely effective and manipulative. And then the third one is force. So top-down corrupt policies, coercion, eventually violence. And it's interesting because these really kind of mimic the manner of manipulation of like a sociopath or someone with narcissistic personality disorder, who will oftentimes start by appealing to your sense of pity and compassion, and then fear becomes part of it. But eventually, when they feel that they're losing kind of control, losing power, it turns into something more forceful and coercive. I've written a bit about that before, that connection. And, obviously I'm not saying that everyone who identifies as woke is a sociopath or something. It's absolutely not what I'm saying. But it makes sense, right, that personality disorders mimic things that are contrary to freedom. And are manipulative by nature. And so an ideology that is built on really fundamental lies is some ways obviously has to be manipulative. And that manipulation is going to look similar to that sort of sociopathy.
Very interesting. Yeah. Well, and I should probably, Joe, did you have something to say?
Well, no, I'm thinking so much of Chesterton here, as we do, right? And kind of some of the trends he was seeing and warning about, and his line where he says, if you when you break the big laws, you don't get no laws, you get the small laws, or we've abandoned the 10 Commandments and now we have 10,000, right? And it.
Right.
In so many ways, Chesterton, not just because he was a paradoxical thinker, but I think because he had his finger on the pulse of modernity and of kind of the creeping Marxist ideology, social Darwinism, all the rest of it. I think he identified that so much of this stuff is filling a void that from the breakdown of society, from the dissolution of the family, which wasn't simply accidental. I mean, it was a planned and intended effect of Marxist ideology as well as other ideologies creeping out of it. But when those things break down, you have to, I think, this is one thing I would say that some Christians and conservatives maybe get wrong, is not taking the time to understand or to sympathize with why this becomes so tempting for people in the modern age, especially for young people who they don't have the sense of identity and community and things that we maybe took for granted growing up and that certainly were hallmarks of Christendom. Because you don't have all of those things, it's no wonder that they're kind of searching for identity, searching for a sense of community, and these narratives can be very alluring to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I agree with that utterly. I love the quotes you started out with from Chesterton. I wrote an article maybe last year or some year before about how interesting it is to me how tenderness as a virtue or quality in womanhood has really been devalued over the decades. And now we want it on this grand social scale. The face of the mother speaks to her child, "You matter, I affirm you. It is good that you exist." And now we want as adults to be affirmed, in almost in that sort of childlike way by a great, deformed mother of the state. But in other words, to your point, that there really are basic human goods that if denied when you ought to have them, you walk through life looking for what you were deprived of. And that is a real human struggle and an understandable one. And so, oftentimes I'll make this distinction that I think, we don't want to treat the woke movement as though every person who identifies with it or promulgates it is an enemy, and is reduced to sort of the ideology that we want to defeat and then becomes an obstacle to our defeat or something. That we need to see people as persons with wounds and with struggles that we have too. That are looking for something really good, looking for belonging, looking to feel that they have protection if they were, and maybe they were deprived of that in their life, loyalty, things that human beings really need. And so I think what you're saying is exactly right, that we have to, we can't become a mirror image of an ideology where we are reductive of the other. and seeing this as a political fight and wanting to just own the libs and, all that stuff. But that's not the approach that Christians are called to have at all.
Also, it's the wokeism is such an intentionally confusing ideology that I think that we can have legitimate compassion there, because it's so confusing, and when you get enmeshed in it, it's easy to be confused. So again, kind of bringing in Chesterton, we sort of need to be bringers of sanity and light, but in a way that's charitable and friendly. So yeah.
That's right. Well, one of the quotes I used of his was from the Maniac chapter in Orthodoxy, that one that I'm sure you guys have talked about a million times, but about truth and love. And, the scientist might be pitiless and then you would remember it maybe more than I would, but the idea that the virtues cannot walk around isolated from one another,
Yes.
or else they cease to even be themselves. And so we, of course, should be compassionate. But once you divorce compassion from reason, right reason, truth, it becomes something that isn't even compassionate at all. So, and the same thing with truth. The merciless truth is really not really true at all, because it's not speaking to the goodness and the dignity of the human person. So, striving for the harmony of all the virtues is he spoke so eloquently on.
Yeah, and I think we see that in spades. The quotation is I forget the full quote, but where he says, because of this divorce of the virtues, and how at the breakdown that came about as a result of the Protestant Reformation, not only did the vices run wild, but the virtues ran even more wild and did more terrible damage, because virtues separated from themselves will tend that way. They're meant to be unity. And so he says that we have now a whole bunch of humanitarians who are dedicated to pity, but their pity is without truth, and
That's
scientists whose dedication is to the truth, but their truth is without pity. And, that's again, I think, getting to the understandable motives, and it doesn't mean that we condone it at all. But I'm reading right now, after having read your book, I'm reading the new book by Abigail Schreier.
I just finished that.
Bad Therapy, fantastic. I mean,
Really
just such stirring. So read Noelle's book first, listeners, but then if you want a second one, look that one up. But the surveys and the way that that schools are really, the nanny state in the most extreme form, that they're trying to replace the parent almost in these students' lives, and say, well, if you need somebody safe to talk to, go to your school counselor rather than your mom or dad. I do think that, to a certain extent, the ideology as manufactured in the capture of the institutions, which I hope we'll talk about, those people might have nefarious motives, but I don't think that people get into the career of being a school counselor with the intention of upending the entire Western culture. And, they probably do want to help kids. It's just that their compassion is without truth. And that's the danger. And we need to recognize that danger so that we can protect our children from it.
Yeah, that's right. I think that probably most people who get into education are very good-willed people. So that's why it becomes very difficult, because there's so much institutional corruption that I think, depending where you are kind of on the spectrum of the education system, as far as how influential you are, how much you are, at the higher levels of teachers' colleges and all these things, versus a teacher who's just in the classroom, there can be a massive difference in how much they understand about the ramifications of what they are, doing in the classroom, with things like social emotional learning and that type of thing. And I think that, most teachers I know who are, tend to be on the left side of things, they don't think that there's anything wrong with it. They truly think that it's an anti-bullying effort. We're just trying to expose kids to LGBTQ stuff, so that they can be more tolerant and more compassionate. They don't have sinister motives. I really don't think so. But at some point, this becomes bigger than what their motives are, because it is so damaging. And I do certainly think that there are people who are pulling a lot of strings in education that have, motives to really revolutionize society and cultural revolution, and think that parents really are the enemy and or a force of regression, so need to be sort of separated from the children for the sake of saving those children. I think that there are significantly powerful people who have adopted those ideas.
Yeah, that would make sense as why it's becoming so prevalent everywhere. It's kind of crazy. Every TV show you watch, every article you read, it all sort of comes from this perspective, unless you're coming into like specifically sort of our niche of Catholic, conservative, whatever. Like, it's tricky.
It's really hard to see past what's really normalized for you. And so if it's in all your media, it really takes somebody to kind of get shaken out of that because it is, the air you breathe, and you stop seeing it with fresh eyes.
You need a Chesterton Manalive moment, where I don't know if you've read the novel, but he takes the professor out on the roof and waves a gun at him, and it's just to wake him up and show him that all of his preconceptions were wrong. And he's teaching the wrong thing, and he needs to wake up to the world and reality. And I think that is at the heart of this movement is a denial of reality. And like you said, it's materialist. So it's trying to change reality to become something else. But in order to do that, there has to be a denial of reality. And that's part of why, like, say, the transgender movement is sort of right at the center of it. Yeah.
I mean, I think that when there are really obvious truths denied, even like the debate about can 2 + 2 = 5?
Yeah.
I think there's something deeper happening there, which is convincing people that the most obvious truths that they know in their core are true, they no longer can believe are true. Then they have to start, in order to align themselves with the ideology, promulgating things that they know are lies. And so then you kind of can't live with yourself. And so you have to start internally trying to force yourself to accept the lie in the depths of your interior life.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the power, is that once you can get people to, it's, sort of Gnostic and neo-Gnostic in that way, that once you can get people to no longer trust their ability to think or to apprehend truth, then you've got them, you can really control them. And so it's sort of a suppression of our ability to reason, or our faith in our ability to reason, that kind of keeps that not only compliance through the normalcy of everything around us, but also compliance through a suppression of our thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's one of the ways that I think Chesterton really stands athwart this movement. I was just thinking about him, but before, in preparation for talking to you guys, and just trying to distill down what I love about him so much. And, I am by no means a Chesterton scholar. But one of the things I realized, and, this is an obvious truth, but, he had such an elegance with words, able to say so much and so little. And he was so, that's why it's endlessly quotable. But it's interesting. It's an interesting juxtaposition with propaganda, where propaganda is built on sloganeering that makes you arrest your ability to think, or what's called thought terminating cliches. Love is love. Hate has no home here. Or, think of all of the, the cliches and the sloganeering that have happened over the last few years and beyond. But Chesterton did the exact opposite. He would say with so little things that made you think so deeply.
Yeah.
I love how in his book, which I think is lesser read, but I read it years ago and quoted it in Awake Not Woke, What I Saw in America.
Love
I think
that one.
in the beginning of that book, do you remember he starts out by saying, it's hard for me something to the effect of, I've had a hard time disabusing myself of the idea that travel narrows the mind. Which is completely counterintuitive than what we normally think, based on how we all think about travel. But then he goes on to say these very thoughtful words developing that idea that I think is very characteristic of the way his mind worked.
Yeah. Well, he does precisely kind of shock people, and you're right noting that similarity, that it almost has that sloganeering aspect, except what it does is opposite, in that it opens you to new horizons rather than closing. And I think that's because he's always, even when he's asking rhetorical questions that are meant to provoke, to be shocking, he has an end, and that's one of the things that I think was really well established in your book and described in your book, and it's something that came up again as I was reading through Schreier's book, is that teleology is sort of a huge problem, and that's really where progressivism, and Chesterton nails this. This is his precise problem with progressives, right? Because the progressive ideology is all about progress without specifying an end, and he points out the absurdity of that. You can't be progressing. You can't even say you're progressing if you don't have an end goal stated. And to Grettelyn's point about this being ill-defined, even while we can fairly call some of these the components of this ideology utopian, I don't know that if you pressed even some of the higher level scholars of it to describe what this great end of society there, yeah, I mean, maybe in the extremes of the transhumanists and the really hardcore Hegelians, they would have an answer to that question. But I think for the most part, they don't even know. They're like a, you know, what's the old analogy of the dog chasing after the car? What's he going to do if he catches it? You know, like what's going to happen here? I don't think they know. I genuinely, they remove that end, and Chesterton frees us to realize that that's why we feel so much vicissitude and paralyzation and anxiety. It's not when you're open to all choices. It's when that's not what reduces anxiety. Having just the whole world open to you without norms and rules and constraining boundaries, that's paralysis.
That's right, because it's purposeless. You know that.
Yeah.
I've said this before, but the promise in the transgender movement that you can be anything you want to be, your body can mean anything in the world, is really just means that it means nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so if your body means nothing, you mean nothing. Right. Everyone knows that their body is integral to themselves, even if they try to deny it. Someone does something to my body, they're doing it to me. And people know that. And I think that promise is monumentally a message of despair.
Yeah.
For kids.
Well, that's
the cruel bait and switch of this, right? Is that, you know, kids are clearly in search of an identity, and then they adopt this identity, but that identity itself is based on a tautology, which is no identity at all, right? Because this is what Matt Walsh's documentary pointed out to those that needed to see it, is that if your definition for, you know, what is a trans woman? Well, it's anybody that or what is a woman? Anybody that identifies as a woman. That's no definition at all, because you can't use the definiens in the definiendum, right? It can't be a circular thing. Otherwise, you have voided the statement, the proposition of meaning. And so that's the really cruel trick, is that we hold, progressive culture holds this out, or woke culture holds this out as the carrot, you know, of this is the identity you're searching for. This is where you'll find your identity. And then when they, you know, it's like mistaking, you know, if you had a way of making cotton candy look like an apple, and then you take a bite of it and it's just boom, it just disintegrates in your mouth. That's sort of what's happening, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. It seems like the engine of progress is just the removal and destruction of the means of oppression. And so that's either through identity groups or through the constraints and social mores of society that cause us to repress ourselves internally. But there's no, as you said, real positive vision, because there's no final causality. We don't know what we're for, and so we don't know what we ought to work toward. And so it is just a movement of destruction, remove, destroy, defeat. Maybe there's an abstract idea that then we will be really free, and who knows what that'll look like, some amorphous, gender fluid, communist utopia or something, I don't know, but it's not a real vision. And so that's one of the ways that I think that there's a lot of hope, is that, people want a vision ultimately. I mean, that's like the basics of leadership, is that people are inspired by positive visions. And so you can control people for a long time based on hatreds. And I think that that's really, it's, one of the reasons why the woke movement is so destructive is because it operates on temptations that we're all very tempted by.
Yes.
We're all very tempted, even if we don't adopt the ideology. We're tempted to be tribalistic and politically tribalistic and scapegoating and all these things. And so, so in other words, there's a lot of fuel that the movement can burn through. But ultimately, there's it's unsatisfying. And so I see a lot more people waking up to the woke movement over the last couple of years, I think is good.
And there's I think it's its inherent self-destructive nature is actually starting to come back to bite it too, because you see, whenever, I think you've talked about this in the book, like the moving of the goalposts. So nothing is ever good enough. So it's very easy to sort of fall out of the wokeness good graces. We've seen this clearly with the feminists and the transgender movement. The feminists who don't go along are being just stepped on and moved past. So it's pretty clear that if you don't keep up with wherever the goalposts are going, you're never gonna, and it's like impossible to keep up with it. So a lot of people are falling out because of this way this movement goes. It's almost like the devil self-destructs himself or something.
Yeah, or I can never say that word. Ouroboros.
Yes, the worm Ouroboros. Yes. Mm-hmm.
No, I think the feminist and transgender thing is fascinating, really illuminating, and a real opportunity to help people see, that the movement didn't betray women; it just never was actually for women.
Right.
They were never the point.
Right.
The point was to antagonize groups of people, and once they stopped being as useful as the next more transgressive movement, which is the transgender movement, then they're easily discarded. Mm-hmm. And then, that's what totalitarian ideologies do time again, is that they use people, and then once they've outlived their usefulness, they're discarded, because it's a movement of utility. It's not a movement of human dignity. Mm-hmm. I think that when that type of the movement is exposed in those sorts of interactions, right? And when in those transitions. And so I think it's so important to kind of highlight what's happening and help people understand this is why this is happening. You think it just doesn't make any sense, but it actually makes perfect sense according to revolutionary logic. Mm-hmm. That transgression, like the insatiable nature of sin, has no limit. And so, what is transgressive today is boring tomorrow, and you need the next thing. And so, the transgender movement will probably be discarded too. Mm-hmm. The flip side is that people have two options once they start to see this. They either abandon the woke movement, or they double down and they say, okay, I need to not be on the wrong side of history, and history's moving pretty fast. And so the revolution is hastening towards something, capital H history. I'm going to push it even further. I don't want to be the person judged by history and, and by my progeny or what have you, or actually you're probably not having any progeny at that point. But,
they will be judged, though, probably.
It can cause escalation, or it can cause it can cause real awakening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's I forget who said the line that I think it might have been Jordan Peterson or somebody put it very succinctly, that the good thing is that this intersectionality algorithm very quickly outpaces computing power, which means that, like, eventually you're trying to run all these cross sections against one another, and you arrive at figures like Admiral Rachel Levine, and you're trying to sort it all out. It becomes an impossible question, and so it kind of derives into its own chaos, which I think is, it's you use the metaphor early in your book of the Tower of Babel, and I was thinking of how in That Hideous Strength, C.S. Lewis, that's the big curse that falls upon the progressive institution of the NICE, which I love that's the acronym of this evil progressive organization. NICE is the Curse of Babel. They can't communicate with one another at the end, and that's what drives them finally into chaos. But if I may just kind of take a little turn here, because, here at the Chesterton Society, obviously Chesterton has this great focus on localism and kind of how to take back, he went through his socialist idealism period and then kind of arrived at what he called distributism. We promote continually as localism. The Chesterton Schools Network is certainly part of this, empowering parents to take back control over their children's education and formation. We could focus very much on the problems and state the problems. I do recommend readers get your book, or viewers get your book and read it. But you also do this work of the Theology of Home, which I think contains some of the answers. So I was wondering if you could just fill us in on that aspect of what you do and how that fits in to this whole subject.
Yeah, no. Sometimes people think that they don't fit together, but as you indicate, I think that they are two sides of the same coin. Certainly, I actually had the opportunity of speaking. It's sponsored by a Chesterton school in Franklin, Tennessee, recently, and I loved the people. My dear friends have a daughter there, and absolutely loves it. So I think that you guys are a huge part of the answer.
Mm.
Um, Promoting that, all institutions that people are going to be needing and flocking to, because of it's just going to prove its point over and over again about with the happiness of the students and the harmony with the parents. And so bravo to that. So Theology of Home, it's a book series. We have 4 books in the book series. The 4th was written by a woman who started working with us named Emily Malloy, who's very talented, creative, domestic kind of talented woman. And so it was great to have her join us. But the first 3 are by Carrie Gress and myself. We met in grad school, Franciscan, actually. And from not only do we have the books, we have a website, theologyofhome.com, where we have sort of like a women's magazine. We aggregate links, about 8 links a day, Monday through Friday. So for our email subscribers, it's free to join, with the idea being that, we kind of, women want to read various things. We in our conversations we'll go from talking about organizing our house to talking about politics to talking about theology, and then to fashion. Women just kind of think in those ways, I think. And so rather than going to media that actually hates everything we believe in and are trying to constantly lace our media with damaging messages, we want women to be able to come to our site and get all of those various sources, but in a way that's not harmful. And then we also have original content there, and we have a shop where we sell our books. We sell Carrie and her husband pour beautiful candles that can be blessed to become sacramentals, and a whole host of home products and things like that. So it's been fun to kind of think about, what ought culture to look like. And the Catholic Church really was the supporter of beauty and craftsmanship throughout the ages. And so we shouldn't be known for kind of junky plastic rosary beads, and we should be known for beautiful things and supporting real Catholic artisans and craftsmen. And so we're really trying to have a little influence and kind of support for that type of effort through Theology of Home.
It's so helpful, as a mom with a young family. We've sort of been in this chaotic period for, I don't know, 50 years at least. So you look around and there's no models. It's hard to find a model because once you wake up to these things that are awful, like Joe said, you are looking for the antidote. And so you're saying, well, what do I do? What does it look like? And it's so nice to see your books and your website kind of presenting in a very, honestly, very feminine, beautiful way. This is what it could be. Try this. And it's so helpful and so fruitful to be able to look at that model and see what works and get a different point of view from, what you see in Vogue or whatever that's out there.
Oh yeah, that's right. I think that women really, all people need to see things embodied to know them to be beautiful, and so we can have these abstract ideas about what a good life is and know them to be true. But it puts some meat on the bones to see it embodied, either through our personal relationships and mentorships, but also, media really affects us. And to have be building, alternatives as you're doing with schools. I think that that's a real crucial way in which we kind of promote that positive vision that we actually have into the culture and seed it into the culture in ways that I think can really have power to help people, empower them to live a good life.
Absolutely.
I think it's such a necessary antidote in the modern age for both men and women to focus on the sanctification and the renewal of the domestic space as the sphere of our influence and control, and to lay aside some of that anxiety for the world at large, that I don't think it's our Lord's intention that we're carrying with the to the extent that we do. We're all a little bit too plugged into that. And I think Chesterton, this is one of his most, I would argue, misunderstood stances when he kind of debated against the suffragettes. And his point, though, was he said he thought it would be a diminishment if women were paying attention to politics in the way that men were, because he thought that would actually narrow their minds. He thought that politics was a narrowing thing. And what I think readers miss is that had politics there meant what Aquinas means by it, or Augustine means by it, or Aristotle means by it, he wouldn't have been making that observation. He was referring to contemporary politics. And I think all of us live out the proof of what he was observing at that point, that he saw that politics was going in this way, that it was going to become a kind of entertainment and a distraction, and a disempowering distraction, a distraction that we would think we would make all this noise and carry these signs and not achieve anything, when neglecting the things that we actually have control over. So,
which is a human temptation, right? I mean, I think we tend to worry the most about the things we have the least control over, and ignore, or, almost reduce in our minds the importance of the thing right in front of us. And that is, so, home does represent so much of that. And for both men and women, that, even though my husband has, there are years I was homeschooling, and, our lives have looked sort of, in that way, very, like a, cliche family, I guess, or I don't know, I'm not saying that correctly, but I felt, even in those years, that the most important thing to him was his family. I didn't tie his time spent in the day to his priority in life, and I think that is something that we all need to make sure that we are carrying that internal kind of compass and order within ourselves, and that affected my understanding of the importance of my domestic life. The husband dignifying it in his mind, dignified it in my own. And so I think we have the real ability to help each other in that way, to keep those things ordered.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And especially it being, it's in my mind now because it is an election year. We have, let's say, a rather contentious election coming up, and already certain things we're seeing in the news, I can see already in my Facebook feeds, whatever it happens to be, people who are friends beginning to snipe, beginning to butt heads and argue, and they're all kind of in one camp, let's say politically, but they're arguing over, I don't want to name names, but there's a figure who is divisive in that way. And we saw this, we've been through this script before, and I think many of us have lost friends, but the most tragic thing I saw was families kind of breaking up over politics in 2016. And what a shame, what a misalignment of priorities, because at the end of the day, one of those is much, much more important. And, one of those will be an earlier question in the battery of questions we face when we go before our judge at the end, whether that's our own end or the end of time. So.
Yeah, you really saw the chaos emerge, I think, and how much, it really is sort of the dark promise of totalitarianism is that, or totalitarian ideologies, that everything becomes political. And so you can no longer see another person in the way that you could, despite political disagreements, still with the eyes of love. That if everything is subsumed into politics, then so is your daughter, so is your mother, so is your grandfather. And so, in speaking around the country the last few years, the thing I hear most consistently is my children or my grandchildren grew up, they got woke, they despise me. And either totally estranged, they won't talk to me, or, it's just really tense and they don't value anything I say. And it's really, really sad and really hard. And I think different than what we've experienced before, even though we've always had political disagreements. This is something new, I think, and escalated. So I think it's a terrible thing, and how we handle it, in our personal lives, because we're pulled to that. It's another one of those, a temptation that is, we're all susceptible to. And so, I've had the same strain that you and everyone's probably had with old friendships, that we always kind of prided ourselves on being able to love each other despite being so different. And over the last few years, it got a lot more difficult. And and it was really really emotionally tricky for me to navigate because I really value old friendships.
Mm.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I've been blessed by some of them really have worked hard to come back. We still love each other and maintain a friendship despite, but it was really rocky for a while. Anyway, yeah, I think that's one of the things that, we have to equip our families for in the future. And I wrote an article actually for Theology of Home recently. So because I've seen so many people on the other side where their kids have grown up and there's all this friction and tension, what can we do now? What are the things that we can really focus on now? And I do think that part of it is being really intentional with our school selections,
Mm-hmm.
Not only college, but K through 12. So again, another plug for Chesterton. They're not paying me to say this. We have a great Catholic classical school in my town too, and smartphones are not a part of campus life, which I think is key. Technology is really a wedge that where ideology can seep into the life of a formative mind and see them away from their parents and into a grievance mindset and a transgressive mindset. But also having a really cheerful home, and that's one of the things that I tell people the most. Make your family life fun. You want your kids to grow up knowing that even if you lived sort of a countercultural life and that it wasn't a life that was characterized by prohibition, but rather by, we had so much fun. There was so much positive stuff happening. We had inside jokes, we had affection, we loved each other. So basic things, but things that I think we all have to remember, and remember.
And I think that's a good antidote to put into your kids' brains too. So like if they're out there in the world and the world is telling them your parents aren't safe, they're not the right people that you should be hanging out, like you should shun them and get away from them and join this movement or that movement, they can access those memories and they can say, oh no, that's not true. My home is nice. My home is my parents love me. So you can put the truth in there every day in little ways, and you can sort of plant that in them, and so that when they hear these lies, they have something true to come back to.
That's right. A truth that wasn't told to them, but that they lived,
right.
Experience. Yes. They knew in the core of their being.
Yeah.
So that's why family is so powerful. It's why the ideology hates family, because family is it creates a wall of defense against the manipulations of ideology and propaganda, because it tells you who you are and that you are more than the material components of your body. And that there's such a thing as law that also is loving, that, a father can represent sort of like the law and the boundaries, but he also can delight in this child in front of him and communicate that this is for their good, not for their oppression. And, there's so many, you also learn to contend with your faults in the life of the family, which I think is also a barrier to the ideology, because the ideology wants you to be constantly examining everyone else's conscience and never your own. And that's part of the way that tribalism is fueled, is through people can no longer self-examine. And the family invites you to do that because you're constantly having to see yourself and your faults. And so, yeah, we could probably speak for hours about what the family offers, but it's such a reminder that's not only the target, it's also the remedy. Family life well lived. I do want to say also, because I said about these older parents whose kids have grown up, that I always tell them too, don't blame yourself. There's probably an idea. There was, no matter, we could do everything perfectly, and our kids have free will, and we have to trust in the Lord and be praying. And so, if in case there are any listeners who are prone to kind of be racked with guilt if their kids have left the faith or something, that's a trick of the devil too.
Yeah.
Amen.
Well, I'm consoled. The one thing, as you were speaking, I was reminded of is just that there's one monopoly that the church and the family and marriage that we have that I think the broader culture and woke culture in particular offer not a bit of. And so I'm always about let's excel at the difference, right? The one difference that we have is forgiveness. That's the one thing I think we can really, really instill in the home. That opportunity for forgiveness, and maybe that would be the appeal that I would hope. And so to those that have lost or have estranged people, always be ready to forgive, because that's our big distinguisher right now, in my opinion. Cancel culture, woke culture, there's no forgiveness. You never get past once you're marked with the scarlet letter, you're doomed for all time. But we have forgiveness and reconciliation, and that's an important virtue to lean into in this day and age.
Amen. It reminds me of this anecdote briefly. My friend Paul Kengor wrote a book called The Devil and Bella Dodd. Bella Dodd, who was a communist in America from Italy. And when she came to the faith, a mutual friend set her up for a meeting with Bishop Fulton Sheen. And she came to his door and he opened it and he immediately put his arms out and embraced her and she started sobbing. And then he took her to Our Lady and they prayed together. And she said that, if she had left the communist religion and then come back to it, she would never have had been met with that sort of love and forgiveness and mercy. She would have been, excommunicated, punished, maybe even threatened with her life. And what a juxtaposition it was, for her as someone who had been a Catholic as a child to come back years later after doing so many destructive things. She really worked against the church in so many ways. And I think that anyway, just to punctuate what you're saying, that's exactly right. That is such the distinguishing characteristic, is that sort of mercy and forgiveness and love.
It's like a incarnate version of the prodigal son. It's beautiful. Yeah. Well, we have been talking for a while. I wish we could talk for a longer time. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share, Noelle, with our listeners?
Oh gosh, I love the ending on the forgiveness part. So I don't think so.
Excellent.
Come to theologyofhome.com and sign up at our site.
Yes. And where can people find your book? Any specific place or?
We sell it on theologyofhome.com, but it's also with our publisher, Tan Books, and anywhere books are sold, really.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again. It's really, really been great.
Thank you. It was wonderful to talk to you both.
Thank you. And thank you, Joe. Always a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for listening and watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, leave us a comment, hit that notification button so that you never miss an episode of Uncommon Sense. We really want to spread our reach and our message because, as we know, Chesterton is always, always, always better with friends. Thank you so much, and God bless you.